Hey, good evening. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in on our Meet the Candidate Forum, co hosted by Galeo and the Gwinnett NAACP. We would like to open up with prayer. May we bow our heads, please? Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day, this evening. We are here to gather with one accord, lifting up your spirit, meeting with one accord in peace, love, and community. We thank everyone who will be on this program this evening, speaking, learning, teaching, advocating, and being about the business of our community. We lift this prayer to our God. Jesus, please lift this prayer to your God. Amen. And peace to all. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. And we're going to be moving on. We have a full packed event for you tonight. We are Gwinnett NAACP. I'm Penny Poole, president. We are a nonpartisan 501c4 organization here to educate, inform, advocate against institutionalized and systemic racism, and also to be the economic, educational, health, political rights of the citizens in our community through our mission and vision statements established since 1909. We are proponents of GOTV to get out the vote and deliver results for legislation and policies for African American and Black people here in Gwinnett. If you would like to learn more about our organization, please go to our website, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram pages. Join us and become a member of our beloved community. And now, the Galeo Impact Fund. David Garcia, would you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Penny. Good evening, everyone. I'm David Garcia. I'm the policy director for an organization named the Galeo Impact Fund. We are a 501c4 organization, and we work to empower and inform the Latino electorate in Georgia. I would like to, if you would like to learn more about us, please visit our website at galeoimpactfund.org. I would like to remind everyone that we're just a little over 3 weeks away from Georgia's May 24th primary election. Early voting began today. Please refer to the Secretary of State's website for early voting locations at mvp.sos.ga.gov. That's mvp.sos.ga.gov. If you're planning on voting absentee, please also visit the same website for instructions and important dates. And if you would like to learn more about the candidates you will see on your ballot and to also access a sample ballot along with candidate profiles, please visit galeo.branch.vote. That's galeo.branch.vote for more information. Thank you, Penny.
Thank you. And now we would like to have a welcome from our newly elected president of the Georgia State Conference of the NAACP, Attorney Gerald Griggs.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to always be with you, with the Gwinnett NAACP and Galeo. And I'm just honored to be a part of this debate and this Meet the Candidates Forum with the 7th Congressional District. And we all know how important our congressional districts are, especially the 7th, which is one of the most diverse districts in Georgia. So I'm honored to be here. I'm Attorney Gerald Griggs. I'm the 13th elected state conference president of the Georgia NAACP. We are fired up and ready to go. We have over 100 branches throughout Georgia, and we are very interested in mobilizing and getting out the vote, but also advocating on behalf of people of color and Black people. And so I'm just honored to be here, looking forward to listening to the candidates, having a robust conversation about moving Georgia forward, and honored to be with the Gwinnett County NAACP and Galeo. Thank you.
Thank you for that warm welcome from our newly elected president. We are excited for what the future holds for the State of Georgia Conference NAACP. And now, before we introduce our candidates for tonight's event, we must note that Representative McBath, previously of the 6th Congressional District, declined our invitation on today to personally address the Black community and other people of color in Gwinnett tonight. She is messaging with numerous TV ads that are not centric of the 7th Congressional District, and is endorsed in these ads by the previous GCPS school board chair, Everton Blair, who nominated a QAnon school board member to be vice chairman in 2022. Also, as the first Black school board chair, he did not introduce or implement any policy to address the over-disciplining of Black and other non-white students in Gwinnett County. And furthermore, Mr. Blair did not use his governing authority to implement order during unruly school board meetings when mobs disobeyed his directives. No police action was taken when laws were being broken. Everton Blair does not speak for the students and families whose children are being led through the school-to-prison pipeline in Gwinnett. Representative McBath, we challenge you to bring your voice to the people in Gwinnett and meet the real Gwinnetians who work for and are vested in the people of Gwinnett. And that is a response from the Gwinnett NAACP. Now, and one other thought also, we want to make it perfectly clear that we are not here, as our community says, to vote in form or fashion. We are standing on policies, and we are standing on legacies. We are standing on integrity, and we will not be endorsing anyone. Well, we are not allowed to endorse, but we will not rubber stamp any candidate that we see who is not working for and by the will of the people. So again, this is a message from Gwinnett NAACP. Now, let's introduce our guests. Congresswoman Carolyn Bourdeaux and State Representative Donna Macleod. We will be asking a series of questions on immigration, social and economic justice. Then we'll conclude with voter engagement questions. We will open the floor to our viewers in between the segments for questions. Please get your questions ready. Now, if we may have an introduction from the incumbent, Congresswoman Carolyn Bourdeaux, and please keep your opening remarks to 2 minutes as you introduce yourself.
Okay, well, thank you so much to Galeo and to the NAACP for hosting this forum. It is good to visit with you, and just want to point out I really do try to show up for the community and try to be there and across many, many diverse communities of this great district. Just a little of my story. I'm the daughter of teachers. My parents were deeply invested in education as a path to upward mobility and really the key to social justice. The turning point, though, in my life was that when I was in college, my family went bankrupt and we lost everything, including our house. It was one of those scenes where my parents managed to move out right as the sheriff was coming to throw our furniture on the curb. It was a really rough time. There was not clear I'd be able to continue in college, but I went on a Pell Grant, Perkins loans, Stafford loans. People in the community chipped in to help me make it. I worked very hard and I made it through. And when I graduated, the student loan officer sat me down and said, "Young lady, you have a lot of debt. You need to get a job right away." So I do have a soft spot in my heart for young people who struggle with that. But my father sat me down and said, "Carolyn, I don't want you to forget that your country and your community really invested in you, gave you this great education. And with that comes a responsibility to give it back." And that's what I've done with my life. I really come to you in service, and I have worked in public service my entire life. I was a professor at Georgia State at the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies. I was director of Georgia's Senate Budget and Evaluation Office during the Great Recession. I was a legislative aide in Washington to Senator Ron Wyden, and have worked on a host of different issues, everything from transportation to education to healthcare. Some of my real passions are around healthcare. I want to see Medicaid expanded. I'm working with Senator Warnock and leading the charge in the House on that. I've worked very hard to try to get voting rights through, and we've had some setbacks on that. But I've since then been sending letters to the Department of Justice to try to get them to intervene. I'm working on education and just delivered a grant to Gwinnett County Schools to have early childhood education. And I look forward to talking with you all about some of the other initiatives I'm working on.
Thank you. And now, if Representative Donna Macleod, if you would introduce yourself, please. We cannot hear you.
Thank you to the Gwinnett NAACP and Galeo for this opportunity to speak to this audience. I am State Representative Donna Macleod, but I was born in the island of Jamaica, the most beautiful island, of course. And I grew up in Ontario, Canada. I actually came to the US in 1998. People often ask me, well, how did you get to Canada? My father was a welder, and he had a skill. And in 1969, he went to Canada when Canada was building its infrastructure. So my father's a union man. And so that's how I ended up in Canada. And I remember the second day of being in Canada, it snowed. And you can imagine a child from the island of Jamaica seeing snow for the first time. But you know what? Grew up in Canada. It's a very diverse area in Ontario, Canada. My daughter was born there. I'm a chemical engineer. I was educated in Canada. I came here in 1998 because of my father as well, because he was moving down to the States, Florida, to work, and decided he was going to retire there. So that's how we ended up coming here. It took about 7 years. I started a process in 91, and in 1998, I got the green card to come here. And I chose Georgia because of the Olympics that happened right in between me coming here. And then in 2000, the election happened with Gore and Bush, and that became a debacle. And so in 2004, I saw this young man come on stage. His name was Barack Obama. And I said, if he ever ran for president, I would be there from day one. And that's what I did. I used to drive down from Gwinnett County, and I've been living in the same house for 22 years. I've been to the 7th for 22 years. And I used to drive down there to help out. And I remember getting doors slammed in our faces at the time. Many, even African Americans, didn't think he would be president, but I did. I knew that he could be. And after he won North Carolina, actually, in that primary, I knew he was going to be president. And I became a citizen in 2012. I ran for my first office in 2016. In 2015, 105, the district I now represent, was gerrymandered, and I still ran. And 27 in 20.
Okay.
And I'm state representative for District 1.
Representative Macleod?
Yes.
Okay, we will be timed, and we want to make sure that we both have equal, that you both have equal opportunity. Thank you for that welcome. And just a little quick housekeeping. Our questions will be timed for 2 minutes each with a 1-minute rebuttal if necessary. We ask that since we are virtual with live audiences, that the rules of engagement include being respectful to all candidates and with no gaslighting or politicking for any side. We are a nonpartisan organization presenting candidates that affect our constituency. We look forward to a constructive and informative conversation. David, if you would start our questioning, please.
Great. Congresswoman Bourdeaux and Representative Mcleod, thank you again for joining us. I'll be asking 5 questions related to immigration, and I'll get right to it. So for the first question, Georgia's 7th Congressional District includes large percentages of AAPI, Latinx, Hispanic, Muslim, and Afro-Caribbean communities. Immigration reform, in particular, ending Title 42, is a salient issue for all of us. Can each of you share your stance on Title 42?
Sure. Who's going first?
Whoever.
Donna, you're highlighted. I'm not highlighted. Okay.
Go ahead.
So we need to end Title 42. And what it is, for folks who are kind of not clear on it, it's basically a provision that allows the border control people to just send people back without any processing, without hearing if they're asylees. And what it's done is created these huge kind of refugee camps on the border. The challenge is that we need to do this in a way that does not create chaos. So we don't want another Afghanistan moment. We needed to leave Afghanistan, but we didn't need to leave it in a way where there are people clinging on to the wings of our planes and then falling to their deaths, right? So Title 42 does need to be ended, but it needs to be ended in a way that makes sense so that we are able to process people effectively, get them in, make sure that we are taking care of our asylees, making sure that we're able to process the people who are coming across the border. And one of the other challenges we have is there are a lot of human traffickers who are bringing people over, and we need to not privilege them in this process as well. So one of the things I've really worked on is to try to increase funding for USCIS. They have huge visa backlogs. They are really not able to handle this. And so recently I just signed on to a letter to double the funding for our immigration services so that we can process people in a way that respects human dignity, that is humane. We do have to maintain control of our borders, though. We just can't have people flooding across. We do have to have some border control and some integrity there. And so that's the balance that we're trying to strike with the whole Title 42 question.
Yes. So on Title 42, so that piece of legislation was actually passed under Trump. And I think this is the problem. This is a country of immigrants. And when you don't respect the actual foundation of this country, and you believe that people are rejects because they are not of a certain background or certain color or shade, we tend to act like we're in fear. And I do believe that there should always be an orderly process for coming into any country. Like I said, I immigrated here in 1998, and it took 7 years to get here. But along with the fact that sometimes we're not, as a country, providing some of the resources to the other countries so that we can help those countries, help their people to stay in that country. And that is sometimes a bigger problem, is how we actually handle folks that are not in this country, and how we see those other countries and how we behave towards them. And so putting money towards it is not a bad idea to help. But I think first we have to go to a root cause of why these folks are trying to come to the United States. And that's what we need to do, is to really analyze this. And yes, we need a process for those folks that are there right now to get into this country and be able to function in this country. But anytime new influx of people come, you have to have resources available for them, because people do demand resources. And you have housing, you've got to have food, you've got a way to get them into the workforce. And so I think it's very important that we also look at the root cause of why people are coming here. But now that we have this situation, how to best make sure the process is done. And I do think the Biden administration needs to take a little bit more focus on that issue.
Thank you for that. Moving on to the next question. Proponents of Title 42 argue that the policy should remain in place until the Biden administration creates a plan to address the likely influx of border crossings and apprehensions once lifted. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas recently announced a comprehensive 6-pillar plan to prepare for and manage increased encounters of non-citizens at our southwest border. What are your thoughts on the plan?
I'm not familiar with his plan, and I'm going to be very honest. But the plan, of course, must include that these folks, where they're going to be going. Does it include specific places that we're going to allow these folks to come into, and how we're going to be able to get them to have a quality life while they're being in process? I don't know the exact amount of steps that are in this plan. But I do believe that I trust this representative, this congressman, and what he has proposed. And I do believe that I've seen him several times, and he has a very good sense of what is going on at the border.
Okay. So we are still reviewing that plan. And part of it is that we need to get resources in place. And it just physically takes time to hire the people, to put in place you have to have courts to process people, to get those resources deployed. So I am very encouraged that Mayorkas is putting out this plan. And we just need to see if we're able to follow through and what the timeline is for deploying those resources. And I think that's very important how we address this. One of the policies I've supported, one, of course, is expanding USCIS. We actually have a backlog of about 9 million requests for visas through USCIS. And it is causing chaos in our community, which is very, very immigrant heavy, and people want their families to come in, and they need work permits, and they need to move from temporary to permanent visas. And so USCIS really needs more resources. I do think that Donna makes an important point. We also need to go to some of these countries where people are fleeing. I was at a Hispanic church a few years ago, and there was a gentleman who sat next to me. He was from Honduras. And he told me the most horrifying story about his brother who had fled to this country. Then he was deported with his wife and his children. And then he was killed. His hands were chopped off and his head was cut off. And that is horrifying to me, that we have allowed things like that to happen in this country, and that we do not give people like that refugee status. But it's also horrifying to me that we permit that kind of chaos in a country like that. We need to support this country. We need to make sure that they are stabilizing themselves and moving to a better place. It is obvious why people are fleeing these countries. They're in a terrible situation. So on the one hand, we need to make sure that we are protecting our refugees, and we do protect people who have a reasonable, the refugee definition is you have some reasonable fear of harm to you. We must protect those people. We need to stabilize the countries that they are fleeing from as well.
Okay, thank you. Moving on.
Quick question. The beeping is when the time is up, correct? It's not when I have 5 seconds left. Okay,
that's
great.
right.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to question number 3. The increase in migration being experienced by the U.S. is consistent with larger global trends. There are currently more people in the world displaced from their homes than at any time since World War II, including in the Western Hemisphere. The current situation at our southern border is indicative of our broken and outdated immigration system, and the reality is that it needs a major overhaul. What solutions can you offer for updating and improving our immigration system?
So I strongly support comprehensive immigration reform, and there are many, many pieces to that. One is the refugee situation, right? Thankfully, now that Trump is out, we've been able to increase the caps on the refugees coming into this country. I have done a lot of work. My office meets on an almost daily basis with working groups to help with the Afghan refugees who have come to our community. And we have built a wonderful network with different social service organizations in our community to help those families come in, get stabilized, and then get some support. We still have a big problem, which is affordable housing there. So the refugee issues are important. One of the humane things that we have done in Gwinnett that's very important is we ended the 287G program. And I just signed a letter to stop funding that program at the federal level. So we've already gotten rid of it here. Why not just get rid of funding for that also? And that is where the ICE would deputize our local police to act as agents of them. We need a path to citizenship. We need a path to citizenship for our dreamers, for our young people who have grown up here. Some of them came in documented, some of them are undocumented, but they need status and a swift path to citizenship. We need to do things like visa recapture, because we have lots of people in our community who need visas, who need permanent legal status. And there are hundreds of thousands of visas that have been allowed to lapse under the Trump administration, and also even under the Biden administration, because USCIS doesn't even have the resources it needs to be able to process visas. So 80,000 visas lapsed last year. We need to recapture those and use those for people who are in that very, very long waiting line. I think that's a good synopsis of them. There are many, many other issues. We need to increase the H-1B visa caps. We need to increase family visas. And I would end with this, which is that we have a labor shortage. And so we can do well by doing good. We can improve immigration to this country and address our labor shortage.
All right. So coming from a family of immigrants, this is personal, and of course impacts. And I've got a lot of Haitians in this area as well, and they're being treated differently all the time. So not only is the comprehensive immigration required, it is so important that we take away as much racially driven parts of any kind of legislation that we pass in the United States of America, because I think, you know, when we look at how immigration has been treated by some people have been treated in immigration, it is clear that there is a bias in that and a racial tone to it. Yes, we need to have a path to citizenship. And I was on the front line of of abolishing 287G. That has been something that we all came together, Black, white, and everyone in this county, to say we're going to reject that. Because when I first moved into Gwinnett County, this was 2000, my subdivision, 95% of the men that were working on the subdivision were men of Hispanic background. The foreman was usually a white man. And I think, you know, we also have extended stays that were built to ensure that they had housing. That was their housing. And I think it's a disgrace that we would treat human beings like that. The other thing that we need to be mindful of is why people sometimes are immigrating to the United States is because of climate change. We need to make sure that we are also addressing climate change. So I think there's a lot of aspects to immigration and the migration issue. And again, my family, coming from Jamaica, and know firsthand, you know, when your visa doesn't get renewed and you're in a position where you're overstaying your visa because you want to stay and work. So, you know, I've had it all in my family, I can tell you that. And so it's so important that we address immigration in a very holistic way, not a partial way, and to remove some of the racial undertone of immigration, because most of the Europeans that are here, they basically had a wide open door because they were from Europe. And that is a problem that we're still seeing today, where Europeans are getting a faster time getting through immigration. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to question number 4. Georgia is home to nearly 400,000 undocumented people from Latin America, including over 20,000 DACA recipients. More than 236,000 U.S. citizens in Georgia live with at least one family member who is undocumented, and about 1 in 13 children in the state is a U.S. citizen living with at least one undocumented family member. The DACA program does not provide a pathway for Dreamers to become U.S. citizens or even legal permanent residents. In fact, there is no legal pathway for Dreamers to earn citizenship at all, despite 86% of American voters supporting giving Dreamers pathways to legal status. Overhauling our immigration system to include a pathway to citizenship is a priority for the Latinx Hispanic community. Please share your thoughts on the current state of the DACA program and your work on creating new pathways to citizenship for DACA recipients, Dreamers, and undocumented Georgians.
Well, I can only speak from my point of view. As a state legislator, we don't do immigrations, but I have had several immigration issues come to my table. So I'm very familiar with the disparity. And yes, if we need to, and as when I'm elected to Congress, I am going to personally take up that charge, because it needs to be included that there is a path to citizenship. One of the reasons why even the census, that I'm even doubtful of the census count, is because of Trump's rhetoric telling folks that they might be put, you know, they might be put out of the country because they don't have a legal status to in this country yet. And that is just egregious, because the census was about counting all the people in this country so that we can provide the resources federally. And I was disappointed, not only disappointed, I was disgusted that this would be the kind of situation we ran into in the census. So as far as the families that are insecure, I've met them personally, so I know that this is real. And the ones that are in this country, and they are citizen or they are green card holders, want to protect their families. They want to make sure their families are not deported. And so we need to be champions of that. And again, because I am a person who has family members who has gone through this is personal to me. And I have in fact constituents from different backgrounds that are seeing this, and mostly people of color that are really being impacted by the fact that we do not yet have a path to citizenship. And by the way, it's not just Hispanic. There's a lot of African American, Black people from different parts of the Caribbean and Africa that are in that situation as well, and Asia. So it's not just one group of people. It's impacting a lot, and we need to do better. Thank you.
So I hear this a lot from the community. I have done 17 town halls, a huge number of them in person, and we call them Coffees with Carolyn. And I stand there and I talk with the community, and at the end of it, every single person who wants to talk to me personally gets a chance to do that. And you'll see the line wrapped around the block, and almost every single one of them is some kind of immigration horror story. The Dreamers is one of them. I talked to a young woman and her sister, grew up in Flowery Branch, wanted to be a nurse, graduated from high school, had been hired by Northside Gwinnett, and had her application. And she went to her mother and said, "There's one thing I need to fill in on this application, my social security number." And her mother said, I never have told you this, but I brought you over when you had just been born, and you don't have a social security number. And so she was not able to become a nurse, and, had to go at various times during the Trump administration into kind of the underground economy because she couldn't work. And that is outrageous, and it is wrong. And one of the first bills I co-sponsored when I was elected was legislation to protect the Dreamers and to give them a immediate status and then a quick path to citizenship. It actually was a bipartisan piece of legislation. It passed the House, but then, like so many pieces of legislation, has gotten hung up in the Senate. And, we really need to do some work. We're going to have to find our challenges. The Senate is 50-50. And to pass legislation like that, we need to have some Republicans on board. And so, I think one of the real challenges we face is how do we build the coalition so that we can deliver these kinds of things to the community. What I've been doing is talking a lot with the business community about ways that we can expand immigration. They have a labor shortage, so I can make the case to them on that. And then, can I find a way to bring Republicans into the fold so that we can actually deliver on some of this really important immigration legislation?
Okay, thank you. And final question from me. Please tell us about the work you have done to support minority communities in your district.
So this is a very, very diverse district. And I spend a lot of time in the churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, as well as doing 17 town halls, 220 community events, really doing deep outreach to the very diverse communities in this district. There are many pieces specific to different communities. In the Black community, some of the things, obviously, we talk a lot about are racial justice. I introduced legislation to remember the Forsyth County racial cleansing and had a day of remembrance and have done an agenda sort of around some of those racial justice issues to try to address it in healthcare, in housing, in education, in the many different ways that I know racism touches the Black community. I do a lot of outreach within the Asian community. We had the spa shootings. I brought a congressional delegation down to meet with different members of the Asian community who are affected by that. And I introduced legislation to remember those spa shootings, to call on them to be prosecuted as a hate crime, and then led up the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act to address those issues. In the Hispanic community, I have the Leadership Council there and have done a lot of work, obviously on immigration, which is important, but many in the Hispanic community also are concerned about small business development. And I find all of the communities here, they're very entrepreneurial. And so supporting small businesses is something that I do a lot of work with, working with the Latin American Association to create a community development financial institution that can help get capital into our small businesses. I delivered a $100,000 grant to our Small Business Development Center to provide in-language services to small businesses. So that's just a taste of the many, many different things I do, and really try to be present for the diverse communities of this district, think carefully about what they need, and then really deliver very particular projects that can help make sure that all of our communities flourish.
Well, thank you for that question. Since I've been living here for 22 years, that is all I've been doing. Long before I was even an elected official, that's what I've been doing, making sure this district, this community, that we got along. We actually we extended ourselves to make sure we got into every community, into the Asian American community, into the Muslim community, into the Hispanic community, so that we would be an example of a county that works together for its diversity. Not only have I done town halls, I visited almost all the schools that are in the district, but one of the things was Hooper Renwick was an African American school back before during segregation, and it was about to be torn down. And I was instrumental in making sure that school now is going to be a museum, and it stands there so that the people that are still alive that went to that school can be proud of the fact that they went to that school and they came out and did great things with themselves, but also for the Gwinnett County to know that African Americans have made quite a bit of contribution to this county. Food giveaway. When our folks need help, I'm there. I'm lifting up boxes and making sure I'm giving people food, because at times it's so hard, and we've seen the inflation. I've partnered with the unions to make sure our folks get food. We have a gentleman that was lynched in Lawrenceville, Mr. Hale, and we've been fighting to make sure that that's recognized. So we recognize and make sure that we're not making history just be a part of somebody's postcard, that it's factual. And making sure Galeo, I work with Galeo in the Board of Elections when it putting Spanish language on the ballot. I was there the whole way supporting that. Back in 2000, and I think it was 15, 13, and 14, we were there pushing. We finally got it. So I've been in this community for a long time. So you know what? It's been a part of who I am. It is where I live. So I don't have to brag about it. I've lived it. And I've shared that with President Poole. We've done this work in this district. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. That's it for me. I think we're breaking for questions from the audience, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, looks like we have a question from Mr. John Cox.
Sure. I'm happy to take it.
At this moment, we wanted to field the immigration questions first, and then this can go along with the other questions regarding that. So there was an immigration question in the chat, and if we could go to that first, and then we can circle back to questions regarding that. I think Miss Adrienne Jones, possibly. Oh,
sure.
I can read that question.
Okay.
From Miss Adrienne Jones. You both spoke of providing resources for immigrants. Can you explain how you will provide, or what level of assistance you will provide to our homeless Americans and assistance to our veterans? Please prioritize immigrants, homeless Americans, and veterans.
Sure. So I'm happy to talk about some of the work that we've done. Where do you want to start? Penny, do you want to call on who you want to start first?
We ended with Donna, so let's please start with you on this question.
Okay,
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. So I'll start with veterans. I have been working a lot on those issues as well. I have a Wounded Warriors Fellow in the Lawrenceville office, and he brings a lot of passion and commitment to veterans issues. What we did is what I often do is I create an advisory group of people who are really interested in those issues, people I meet at the different town halls or people that I reach out to try to bring them in and really talk about what the challenges are. For our veterans community, I have worked on 2 specific projects to deal with some of the challenges they face. The first one is that I have gotten a grant of over $500,000 for Hire Heroes. And this is a grant to help veterans get jobs. I'm currently asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars for a group called About Face, which is to help with mental health services for our veterans. One of the other huge complaints I heard from veterans was about our VA Health Center. And there was a lot of racial injustice too in sort of what I was hearing about that. So I brought David Walker, who is the regional director for the Southeast. Turns out he's a neighbor of mine, so I could go knock on his door if I need to and ask for his help. But he did a whole forum with veteran serving organizations to start talking about how he's trying to tackle the VA problems. So I'm working on this on many, many different fronts, both at the very local level, but then also at the national level to try to make sure more resources are flowing to our veterans. We owe them that. They have put their lives on the line for this country, and they get services that they deserve. And I work hard at that. In terms of homelessness, right? And I saw another question about affordable housing. This is a huge issue in our district. All of a sudden, in the past few years, the economy is roaring back, but the problem is that affordable housing is just plummeting. And this is a huge problem for our veterans, for our immigrants. Talk about the refugee issue. One of the challenges is they can't find affordable housing. I'm on that also, and I'll talk later about that.
Okay, thank you for that response. Representative Mcleod?
So let me start by saying taxpayers always deserve a return on investment. So whether you pay income tax or sales tax, you're contributing to the fiber of this country. And so I think it's important that we give a return on investment. In regards to homelessness, I think one of the things that we're seeing in Gwinnett County in particular is that you've got these investors that are buying up entire subdivisions and then selling and then basically renting them out at a higher payment. We need legislation to stop this. This is unacceptable because it's creating that homelessness, even greater homelessness problem. In Gwinnett County, 10 years ago, we had to convince Gwinnett County that they had a homelessness problem. The chairperson at the time refused to acknowledge homelessness. So first of all, we had to get people to accept that there was a homelessness problem. But I've been working with the housing authority, Leisha Slowinski, and with President Poole to look at how we can best serve our constituents in Gwinnett County so that we can best find them good homes to live in. So homelessness is really, a lot of it has got to do with the local issue, but I think federally we can also help by creating legislation that standardize how we actually treat people that are homeless. And I think that's very important. Veterans, we talk a lot about it. Supporting veterans, we do a lousy job at supporting veterans. And I think this is very important that we really, really look at veterans and what they really need. There are a lot of veterans in our district. And I think talking to them and seeing exactly what they need is very important. I know President Poole's brother is a veteran and he's always made it clear about what he wants. So I think that there's not a shortage of what they need and want. What there is a shortage of is people actually listening to making sure that they get what they need. And I would say it's important that we never, ever forget what the veterans have done for this country and actually say what we're going to do in supporting them. And that is not being done.
Thank you for that. Before we move on, we have several questions in the chat. However, we want to make sure that we have covered the topic of immigration with those who are listening. If there are any additional questions, we thank Galeo for that myriad of questions that covered this topic. But if not, we still have a few minutes and we can mention some of the other questions in the chat. We want to move into policing for a minute. So let's do that since it's there and he is very inquisitive. John Cox, good evening. What is your understanding of qualified immunity And what is your plan to rectify its abuse in the protection of police officers who have been shown to have violated police policy and harmed or killed a citizen? Previously, we started with you, Congresswoman Bourdeaux. Please, Donna Macleod, Representative Mcleod, if you would answer this question, please.
So in regards to qualified immunity, no one is above the law. I became a citizen of this country, so I read the Constitution and I had to take the test. And one of the first things about what they say about this country is that no one is above the law. And giving people qualified immunity is basically saying that you can murder without any repercussions. And I think that is that's not going to fly in our community anymore. I think one of the things that we need to really do is to get policing straight. I think it's important that we get people that are in the community to serve the community when it comes to policing, because the people that are best in your community is the people that knows the community the best. And I think this is where we've moved away, where people are coming in from different parts and different places just to work, and they look at it just a job. I was actually, back in 2016, I was actually pulled over by a Gwinnett County police officer who told me, and he asked me if I had a camera rolling, and I told him, no, I didn't. And that's when he told me, he said, look, when we're called out, we were told to escalate a situation, not de-escalate it, but to escalate it. Because again, when you're in the market or in the business of profiting off human body being in prison, and on top of, and even worse, being dead, that is something that we have to be very, very cognitive of. And I would end qualified immunity. That is not a place. If you're an officer, you need to make sure that you are doing the job you were hired to do, and that is the servant to protect. The taxpayer actually pay you your salary. And I love police officers as well, because I know when I need something, I'm going to call on them. It is it's not that I don't care for police officers, but there are police officers that have taken it to another level in which they think they are above the law, and no one is above the law.
Thank you for that observation. And now, Congresswoman Bourdeaux, your response, please.
So I very much appreciate that question. And I know, Penny, you have done a lot of work on this. And I remember how, we were all really shocked when our own Gwinnett police, there was a man who was handcuffed on the ground, and they, beat him up, and it was on camera. So they caught them when they did that. That was horrifying. I was very involved in the marches, the George Floyd marches, the Black Lives Matter marches. And I just want to take a moment to appreciate that this community really came together. It was a very diverse community. It was all across this district in support of our Black friends and neighbors. I am a co-sponsor, I believe an original co-sponsor of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And this is legislation that would end qualified immunity. No one is above the law. And this would address that issue. It also creates a registry, a national registry of police misconduct. One of the other things I hear a lot about and is a huge concern is a police officer, does something violent in one part of the community. He's fired from that, police organization, and then he goes and moves to another one. And this other organization has no idea what he did previously. That is unacceptable. So that bill, the George Floyd Justice and Policing, addresses that. The bill also bans certain types of chokeholds, certain types of practices that have led to people being killed. So that's one step in the right direction. But generally, what I have been working with the police departments here, and as Donna says, we know there are times we need them, but we need them to look like the communities they police. We need them to be well trained. We need them to have some support services like mental health support services. A lot of times they're called to deal with a situation, and this is a person who is substance abuser, mentally ill, and they need support there. So I've been working on getting grants and community projects to our police departments so they can have crisis stabilization centers. They can have residential substance abuse treatment centers. They have ways of treating people that it really addresses the root problem and is not just a violent overreaction.
Thank you for that.
Can I just say something? I never saw Congresswoman Representative Bourdeaux at the Black Lives Matter mark.
Okay, hold on. Let's do this. You have a rebuttal. You have 1 minute. If you would please go ahead, Donna, Representative Macleod.
Thank you, President Poole. I just had never seen. I remember when we were in Lawrenceville, and I actually was called by the mayor to come out because we needed to make sure that we didn't escalate anything. And I went out there and put my body in front of these young people and marched with them. I'd never seen Representative Bourdeaux out there, and I've been in almost every city in Gwinnett County when this was happening. I have the pictures to prove that. Yeah.
Not only did I join marches.
Well, so just a moment. Are you through? Your 1 minute is up, Representative Macleod?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. And now, Congresswoman Bourdeaux, if you would have your rebuttal, please.
Sure. Not only did I join marches, but my opponent, Rich McCormick, in 2020, got video feed of me in those marches and read negative ads against me from them. So, I have absolutely been a part of them. You can go look at my Facebook feed. I'm sure you can even Google the negative ads that he put up against me, because I did participate. I did care deeply. You can see signs of me. You can see me there carrying a sign. I showed up at Swanee Town Center. I brought my son because I wanted him to see the community, and I wanted him to understand the impact of racism on Black people's lives. I wanted him to be a part of that, and I wanted him to know what it was to stand up against that. So please know that I do care deeply. You can actually go see videos that I posted and broadcast, not about the campaign, but talking about these kinds of issues and, my deep concern and what needed to happen to address them. When I came to Washington, I have come with a very deep commitment to addressing racial injustice. And I can talk more about that. I see I'm out of time. I can talk more about that later.
All right. At this point, we thank you for this segment again. We're going to move forward to our next segment, which will be about social, economic justice. You will receive a series of questions. And if you're in the virtual audience, please start getting those questions together now so that we can present them as we finish with this segment, so that you can get specific questions answered that will affect our daily lives and this topic that is so important to us. Okay. Our first question is about the Buildback Better Act. Makes historic investments in Black, Latino, underserved, and marginalized communities. It is a win for all that will create jobs, boost our economy, and invest in hardworking people across the county. With these transformative investments in healthcare, childcare, and affordable housing, we could better the lives of nearly all of these people from these different demographics. Please share your thoughts on the Build Back Better Act and now how you will support it in office and help to move it forward. If we can start with you, Congresswoman Bourdeaux.
Sure. So I supported Build Back Better. I worked on it. I got some key priorities into that legislation. And one of the top things I have been working on is expanding Medicaid in Georgia. We simply can't wait on the governor to do it. Hopefully Stacey Abrams will be elected governor, but then she's got to get it through a legislature that will be Republican, and I don't think they will expand. So we really need to find a federal solution to that. Senator Warnock introduced a bill on the Senate side, and I am the leading sponsor of that on the House side. I raise that issue almost every single time I see the House leadership. I saw Jim Clyburn a few months ago and asked him where that was. I just sent a letter last week demanding that that pass as a part of Build Back Better or Build Back Better Light, whatever we're able to get Joe Manchin to agree to. That passed the House. In that was health care. It was reducing health insurance premiums. It was negotiating the price of prescription drugs to bring down those costs. We also had expansion of childcare. It expanded childcare for 3 and 4-year-olds, pre-K, had subsidies for childcare, $150 billion in there for affordable housing, including down payment assistance. It had an extension of the child tax credit, the earned income tax credit. So it had many, many policies in there that were extremely important to me and that we do need to get done. And I strongly support it. Our challenge is that we have Joe Manchin in the Senate and Kyrsten Sinema, and they are not going to let it out. And the thing is, you have to have 50 votes in the Senate, and we are short 2.
All right. Thank you for that. And Representative Mcleod, we understand that you have worked through the State House of Representatives here in Georgia. But if elected, please share your thoughts on the Buildback Better Act and how you will support it going forward in the Congressional House.
In fact, we had a subcommittee on COVID. And if you ever go back through those videos, it's the Georgia House Democratic Caucus, you will see that I've been a big champion of the Build Back Better because it's such an important piece of legislation. And I disagree with Representative Bourdeaux. In fact, I had to call her because I got a call from Washington because she was holding out because she was a moderate Democrat who felt that Build Back Better was too big and she wanted to hold back. And I believe it was a political reasons. I think she felt that the 7th Congressional District was going to move more into Forsyth County, but we had to call her. In fact, several legislators had to call her to go on the floor to vote for Build Back Better. The universal pre-K is such an important part of making sure we stop the school to prison pipeline. And she didn't seem to think that she thought that pouring concrete and asphalt was more important than making sure that the human infrastructure part is also as important and giving our taxpayers a return on investment. That was something that we had to push her on, and that she cannot say that she was all buying into the Build Back Better. She was not. And I have proof of that because I have a text message that I text her to say, don't put a blockage on this. This was all Democrat. All it took was all of Democrats agreeing to the Build Back Better in the House without any disagreement. When she decided to become a moderate Democrat, the lens of the media started switching and basically saying the Democratic Party is fractured. She created that problem when she did that. Build Back Better is superior legislation for the people, This is not about an individual. Everyone that pays taxes deserve to get these benefits, these child tax credit, the pre-K, all of that is as important as pouring concrete and mortar and asphalt. And I was disgusted when this happened, and I've told her that.
All right. Thank you, Representative Mcleod. And Congresswoman Bordeaux, you have a 1-minute rebuttal.
Sure. So what happened with that was there was a dispute over whether the infrastructure bill should go first or whether it should be used as a lever to try to get Joe Manchin to agree to Build Back Better.
Yep.
I had worked on the infrastructure bill. This is something very, very important to the people of this community. It is a historic investment in infrastructure. It is about transit. It is about clean energy and climate change. It is about many things important to us. If I had not done that, then we would never have passed infrastructure because Joe Manchin wasn't going to give in. He didn't care. Every time people would come to him and say, well, what is it you want in Build Back Better? What is it, you would agree to? He'd say, you've got a perfectly good infrastructure bill there. What happened was that the progressives hijacked infrastructure. They called people like you, Donna, to put pressure on me. And then what happened was the Democrats were massacred in Virginia. They were massacred. And after that, the entire Democratic caucus said, oh, we should really pass that infrastructure bill. And they did. And basically, the entire Democratic caucus ultimately agreed with me.
Thank you for that.
Can I have a rebuttal? The infrastructure bill was.
I get one as well. I get one as well if she gets to say.
Just a moment. Yes, go ahead for your rebuttal. And yes. Congresswoman Bordeaux will also have a 1-minute rebuttal.
The infrastructure. the infrastructure bill passed, so it was just waiting on the Democrats to decide if they were going to pass Buildback. That infrastructure bill, the progressive in the caucus held on to the infrastructure bill because it already was passed. The Republicans had already passed it. It was a passed bill. What the progressive in the House wanted to do was make sure they moved together, and they told everyone in the caucus that they wanted those two bills to move together. None was more important than the other. And when Congresswoman Bourdeaux went in front of the camera and joined a small group of Democrats and called themselves moderate Democrats, they changed the narrative on that bill. And that created a bigger problem. So it wasn't that the infrastructure bill didn't pass. It already had passed. Yes, it had. The moderate.
Okay, just a moment, please. Let's speak one at a time.
The bipartisan infrastructure bill had passed. What the progressive wanted was both bills to move together, and she wanted that bill to go because she wanted to have a
Representative
on her column if she went into force.
Representative Mcleod, your time is up.
Thank you.
Congresswoman Bourdeaux, you have
you're
1
right.
minute rebuttal.
Sure. They did want them to move together, but they were not going to move together. And the problem with Build Back Better is that Joe Manchin didn't support it. He still doesn't support it. Kristen Sinema didn't support it and still doesn't support it. And if we had done what the progressives had asked, we would still be sitting here with nothing. And I just want to point out that Democrats all over the country are running on infrastructure right now. Ironically, even Lucy McBath is out there touting infrastructure and how great that bill is. We needed to take the win. And that is what I stood for. It was not about Build Back Better. We needed to get that done too, but we needed to take the win at that particular moment.
Okay. At this point, we will move on. We will have similar questions that we can get both of your input on. As a matter of fact, moving to the next question, which is very specific to the African American community. When President Biden was elected, a campaign acknowledgement was that he would not have won the election if it were not for the Black community. Specifically, he noted African Americans and included set-asides in the Build Back Better economic stimulation plan that set aside funds for the revitalization of historic African American communities that have been devastated by institutional and systemic racism. Gwinnett County has minimally recognized the lynching of Charles Hale on his courthouse steps. We know many more atrocities that have taken place here as enslaved people are still feeling the residuals of overt racism. Now the Build Back Better economic stimulus plan has died in Congress. And Representative Bourdeaux, I'm going to put this for you, and then I will have this question also for Congresswoman Bourdeaux. The NAACP wants to know, if you were elected, will you set aside funds specifically for the African American communities for affordable home ownership, to close health disparities gaps in our community, and for the stimulation and development of African American small businesses because of the 400 years of enslavement that our community has had to endure?
So there was a lot in that.
Yeah, let's start with, I think we're going to switch it and take it to Representative Mcleod. And what we're looking at, again, in the bottom of it, we talked about the history of what has happened to the African American people and how this past election was won on the backs again of the African American people. So the question succinctly is that the Gwinnett NAACP wants to know, if elected, will you set aside funds specifically for African American communities for affordable home ownership, to close the health disparities gaps in our community, and for the stimulation and development of African American small businesses. And this is, we're still holding Joe Biden to those promises he made, and we want to make sure like-minded people are in that Congress when it's time to vote. Representative Mcleod, if you were elected, what would you do? We're not able to hear you.
Sorry, I had a call come in, emergency. So can you repeat the question? I had an emergency call.
No problem. No problem. And I'm going to kind of narrow it down because I've said it so much. But what it comes down to is that President Biden acknowledged the African American community for winning this election for him. And as such, he made promises to our community that died with the Buildback Better plan.
Yes.
Now, we as African Americans who have been enslaved in this country for over 400 years, and in this county where we have evidence of Charlie Hill being hung on the courthouse steps, publicly hung on the courthouse steps, we're saying that these the atrocities that were taking place in Gwinnett County, and the atrocities have residuals of overt racism. Because of those things, the African American community wants to know about getting targeted, set aside funds, targeted funds for our community. Would you, if elected, support these funds for the African American community?
Absolutely. That is why I've been so passionate about Build Back Better. And that is why when I called up Representative Bourdeaux and told her this is so important to us, I have the text to prove that. That is so important. I get it. I get it. Get a win. Get a win. But sometimes some things you have to put your line on. If you understand passionately about how we feel and how Black people feel in this country, that they have not gotten their 40 acres and their mules. I'm telling you, she did not understand how important this bill was. That I tried to impress upon her just how important this bill was. And she felt that it was more important to get this win. Yes, we're going to campaign on it. It's a good bill. I've never said that pouring concrete and asphalt wasn't good. It's great. Our infrastructure needs to be built, but there's a human parts to it. And that's where I think Congresswoman or Representative Bourdeaux missed the point. African Americans have been fighting this country for over 500 years. And every time they keep getting shot down, we give people an opportunity to stand up for us, and they don't do it. And that is why I'm running for the Congress in the 7th Congressional District.
Thank you, Representative Mcleod. Congresswoman Bourdeaux.
Sure.
I have read it. I have paraphrased it. I can just go over it tersely.
That's okay. I'll talk about sort of the sense of it. So, just to go back to Build Back Better on voting rights.
Specifically.
Right? No, but let me just talk about the whole trying to get it through the Senate, right?
Okay, well,
because this is important.
Just a moment. I will let you start from top to bottom, but I want to make sure you're specifically addressing the portion that is asking for set aside because of our horrific history that is specifically setting aside targeted funds for the African American community in home ownership, health disparities gap, closing the health disparities gap, and the stimulation and development of African American small businesses. Please, Congresswoman woman Bourdeaux, have your 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, we have a 50 vote margin in the Senate, and I tried with voting rights to run that all the way to the ground, all the way. We went up and we asked the Senate to take down the filibuster. I sat on the floor while they had that vote, and they would not do it. They would not budge. And it is the same problem with Build Back Better. So I advocated ferociously for it. I still advocated for it. And I actually am hopeful that when I go back in the next few months, that we'll be able to get something productive done. But, we are working on that. In terms of set-asides, I am not sure exactly what you were talking about with that, but please know there have been many times where I have strongly supported set-asides or targeting funds towards the African American community. And that is all about addressing income inequality, which is a result of systemic racism that has happened over time. So the restaurant revitalization funds, they were targeted first to the African American, Hispanic, Asian, minority, and women business owners. The courts struck that down and said we couldn't do that, but that we did do that more or less. Similarly, in agricultural support, that was again, targeted towards Black farmers. I have signed on to legislation such as the Momnibus to address racial disparity in health outcomes, particularly for maternal mortality. With housing, I am not sure what policy you're thinking of, but absolutely we want to make sure that we are supporting and uplifting the Black community. I want to also say that I am a co-sponsor of HR 40, which is legislation to study reparations and to think about, how do we address some of these long-term inequities. Lucy McBath is not on that bill. And I was one of the very few, frontliners, people in these very competitive districts to sign on to that bill. And I did that in April of last year. So that's not something I held off on. I did that right away. Additionally, I've been working on a number of other things to try to address some of these long injustices. The Work Act. Yep, I'm out of time.
You're out of time.
All right.
Okay. And it's great that you mentioned HR 40 because that's where we're going to segue into next. Here's another question, please. And I know they may sound redundant, but they are nuances that make them all separate. UVA, Rutgers, Georgetown, and now Harvard University, to name a few, have all instituted a form of reparations for the unjust enslavement of African Americans. In particular, Harvard just pledged $100 million and is attempting to address the education, social, and economic legacies of slavery and racism. Congresswoman Bourdeaux, during the 2020 campaign, you have been studying the situation. During our last debate, you said that you had to get more clarification. Now, as an incumbent, will you prioritize and shape a bill with like-minded members of Congress going across the aisle to introduce reparations for African Americans, as Indigenous Americans and Asian Americans have had reparations paid to their communities? They've been studying this since 1970. It's time for someone to initiate this legislation.
So even the bill to study it cannot pass Congress right now. And I think we have to take this one step at a time. I have co-sponsored that legislation. I have talked with Sheila Jackson Lee, who is the main sponsor of that. And, step one is to understand and to build a consensus among members of Congress about what should be done. Otherwise, it's just a meaningless bill that sits out there forever. I do want to talk about one victory that we have had that I worked on, and that was a resolution to recognize the racial cleansing that happened in Forsyth County. It also called for a day of remembrance. I had a day of remembrance at Poplar Hill Baptist Church, and we had people from Forsyth County come and meet the descendants of the people who were run out of Forsyth County. It was a very tough conversation. It was a very important one. And in Forsyth County, they are creating a scholarship for the descendants of what happened in Forsyth County. And I was able to connect young people in that meeting with the scholarship, and that is going to help them get a college education. So I think that is it's small, of course, but that's an important first step. And then, we need to focus on HR 40 and seeing if we can get some traction on that first.
Just a question myself. I thought that HR 40 had passed.
No, it doesn't even have enough co-sponsors to get out of the House right now. So
Okay.
we have one step at a time, right? We have to try to get that moving, and that is not moving. I mean, my frustration is, right, I can't even get Medicaid expansion through in the House, right, which is really basic, but it is essential to racial justice. 60% of the people who would benefit from Medicaid expansion are, Black. And so we need to get some of these bills through. It is very challenging right now to get these kinds of processes moving, given that we don't have very large majorities in the House or in the Senate.
Okay. And just an FYI, my husband and sons are descendants of the people who were run out of Forsyth. So
well, I will connect you. There's some good people trying to heal the community.
Okay. And Representative Mcleod, now for that question for you, do I need to read it? All right. You have 2 minutes. You're on mute again.
Sorry about that. I got my grandson in back. But I want to say this. I think African Americans are the only ones that's never been apologized to, and they certainly have not gotten their 40 acres and their mules. I wanted to bring up something that I think that the audience needs to recognize is that we do need a majority. We need a bigger majority. There is a majority, so which I'm surprised that we have not moved HR 40 through the House of Representatives in Congress, since Democrats still are the majority in the House. I have been in the House where I'm definitely a minority in the Georgia Assembly, where Democrats are 77 and the Republicans are 105. I think that the U.S. Congress with majority Democrats should at least be able to pass that out. That doesn't make any sense to me. So maybe there are people there that, again, the listening audience, and if you know people in other states, maybe we need to remove some of those Democrats that are not supporting this kind of legislation, because this is important legislation. What I will say, I would have to look at HR 40 a little bit more as to how they're going to ensure that the money is targeted. And I know that some of the universities are much more targeted on reparation and have a better controls of it. But again, the Democrats right now are in the majority in the House of Representatives. There's no reason why HR 40 should not pass unless you have moderate Democrats who don't want to move these bills forward, or whatever they want to call themselves. This is about equity. This is about African Americans actually getting their 40 acres and their mule. I wasn't born here, so I don't know if I'd be a part of that. But our people were enslaved in Jamaica as well. So, slavery went across from South America to the islands to North America. And I just want people to understand just how important reparation is to making some kind of down payment on what has happened to Black people in this country and the contribution they have made to this country and have never been acknowledged properly for.
Thank you for that answer. If at this time, do we have any questions from our viewing audience in our chat regarding social justice, economic justice? Please feel free. I think we may have had some earlier. And Edward, if you could help me, if we could go through the chat. Okay.
Here's a good one on voting rights.
Many are disappointed at how our voting rights are being stripped away. How do we inspire others to vote when it seems more hopeless? If we can start out with you, Representative Mcleod. You're on mute again.
About what was the question?
Many are disappointed at how our voting rights are being stripped away. How do we inspire others to vote when it seems more hopeless?
So I want to correct people. We often use the word voting rights. Technically, the only people in this country with an actual right to vote are white men that own land. Everybody is an amendment to the Constitution. The 15th giving Black men an ability to vote, the 19th giving women ability to vote, the 26th giving young people 18 years of age and older an ability to vote. And that is what is at the core of this, is that we're only given an ability, yet they still want to strip that ability away. When they struck down Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act in 2013, it basically opened Georgia to basically start doing poll taxes and disenfranchising people. And I sat in the Georgia legislative branch, so I know what went on at SB 202. It's been discussed and it was based on a lie, a big fat lie. And that Donald Trump told that he lost the election because of stolen votes. And there was no such thing. People just didn't vote for him. And I think he has a hard time accepting that they just didn't like him. And I think at this point in time, we need people that are really strong on voting rights. Congresswoman Bourdeaux had a statement in the AJC dated October 21st, where she said, you were asked about anti-voting suppression laws, and you said, I don't know if it is appropriate for me to be the leader on this. I think the Black community gets to be out front, but I am empathetic. No, you're a leader. You make laws, you push laws, you lead on it. If somebody else is not making the law, you can make the law. This is unacceptable, a response from a congresswoman who knows, at whom I've talked to at length about voting rights, who I've registered over 30,000 people in this county. Congresswoman Bordeaux cannot say she's even registered one person in this county. I've been fighting this fight for a long time. Sunday voting, President Poole and myself, we fought for that. Extended early voting, we fought for that. When you talk about really people that really believe in the ability and the right to vote, then you know what? We need to, one of the first things I need to do is to make sure that we actually have a right to vote, not just an ability, not just an amendment to a constitution.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Representative Mcleod. Congresswoman Bourdeaux.
Sure. So, Donna, please know I appreciate your advocacy for voting rights. You have done a lot, and it has been very important. If you read the full quote that I said, it said, I'm emphatically lending myself to this effort. And it's in the context of things like the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. As much as I would love to personally be the person who introduces that bill and leads the charge on that, I am white. And, I am not subject to some of the suppression that the Black community faces. It is far more appropriate that Terry Sewell, who is a Black woman in Alabama who represents Selma, be the lead person on that bill. And it is my job to uplift her and to push and do whatever she needs to get that bill through. My staff called her office every single week. My wonderful legal counsel, Tamesa Bailey, called her every single week to try to get that bill moving faster. And she was like, well, wait, we need to make sure the Department of Justice has got everything just right. The first speech I made before the Democratic caucus was to urge them to get moving on that bill and to get it done earlier. They didn't introduce it until the fall of 2021, which was extremely frustrating for myself. And I know many voting rights advocates here in Georgia, because it just seemed like it was taking so long. We were so tied up with trying to persuade Joe Manchin to somehow pass Buildback Better that we put voting rights on the back burner, which made me crazy. I have fought voting rights. In 2018, I was more disadvantaged than probably any other candidate in Georgia and in the country. I lost that race by 433 votes. I had to litigate for weeks and weeks to bring in the absentee ballots that had been thrown out. And those 2/3 of those were voters of color. So I cared about it. In 2020, the situation was so serious. I had an entire wing of my campaign devoted to voter protection. I had people at the different precincts. I had lawyers on call. If you recall, we had these long lines and we were sitting there taking the affidavits to fight it. I fight it every single day, every race. I fight it in Washington and I fight it on the ground.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Can I say something?
Yes, you may have a 1-minute rebuttal, Representative Mcleod.
I know something about fighting for voting in the state of Georgia and being in the minority. I know something about that. The point is you fight. And what that statement does not say about fighting and depending on Representative Sulu to do this. No, we need people that will, you know what? If that's not happening, then we create something different. But at the end of the day, fighting for voting rights is a right. It has to be a right. And right now, all we are working with is an ability. So let's look about getting a true right to vote in this country, not just an ability for those people of color and people that are women. We need a right, not an ability. And I don't see anything that says that. I'm seeing amendments to this. And I love the For the People's Act and I love the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, but all of them is still not giving us a right to vote in. So no one can ever mess with us anymore when it comes to voting.
Can I just, so.
Thank you for that. Congresswoman Bourdeaux?
Yeah.
You have 1 minute.
I appreciate that. And again, Donna, I appreciate your passion for voting rights. I admire it. And I admire the work that you have done on this. And please know, I fight for this every single day. And it is very frustrating. It is held up in the Senate. I wish I could give you some way through. We asked the senators to take down the filibuster for voting rights. I sat on the floor until it went down in such bitterness. What I've had to do, we have to find a way through though. And so what I've done is I have led letters to Merrick Garland and people like that to start addressing it through the Department of Justice, because we can't wait on legislation. We have to address these issues. So we've asked him to do that. Actually, when we had those problems with voter registration and the automatic voter registration was taken down by Governor Kemp, I led a letter right off the bat, the minute I found out about that, to the Department of Justice and sent a letter to the state as well, and they fixed the problem. So I work on it every single day in every possible way that I can.
Thank you. Do we have more questions in the chat regarding social and economic justice? I do see, is it an observation or here we are? Oh, it's an observation. Not a question, but an observation. I stopped at the Gwinnett County Board of Elections headquarters today in pursuit of a sample ballot. They did not have any, and I was prevented from photographing the one that was posted on the inside of the window. It really felt like my voting rights were being restricted. I was able to find one through the state voter page. I know that there has been much controversy regarding the sample ballots, and if we can start with Congresswoman Bourdeaux, are you aware of other of what this constituent is speaking about?
No, I have not heard about this particular problem. But if there are problems, I encourage you to reach out to my campaign and raise them. I have all sorts of attorneys that we work with to try to address these sort of issues. If you recall, Penny, back in the primary in 2020, we had a number of voters who showed up to vote on election day, and there were no voting machines in the precincts. And I know that you found out, and all of my campaign found out, to immediately address that issue. We had challenge after challenge. It was so bad in the 2020 primary. It was in June of 2020 that I think at the end of that, I called on Brad Raffensperger to resign. It was so frustrating. Because of that, I put together an entire wing of my campaign devoted to voter protection issues, the only campaign in the country to do that. And then early vote in 2020, if you recall, we had whole lines down in Lawrenceville, in Swanee, all over. People were waiting 8 to 12 hours to vote. And my team was out there. We collected affidavits. We were getting ready to litigate. We complained publicly, and the Secretary of State was able to address that and fix those problems. But we are on it. Please feel free to reach out to the campaign, and we will get your problems addressed.
Representative Mcleod, do you have a response to this voter?
Absolutely. So I just sent a text over to Zach, who is the supervisor of the Board of Election and Registration. I'm hoping that we'll get an answer before we finish today. That is something that we have been doing for a long time. I can't even tell you how the minute stuff that we've had to fight for, like signage at each polling location, your extended early voting. When that issue happened at the precinct where there was no machines, I got a call at 6:30. It was 7 o'clock, 7:05 in the morning. I got a call, a personal call from a constituent saying there was no machine. I got up and I had to call up the supervisor, and she's telling me she's sending over the absentee ballot, provisional ballots. Provisional ballots will not do. You need a ballot. So I have been personally involved in this for over a decade. And so I hope that I will get an answer for you before we stop today. But again, it is unacceptable. I actually picked up some application because I have some constituents that are elderly that wanted to have that application. And that if you're voting absentee, that application is critical to the process, because we don't have automatic voter registration, or we don't have vote by mail. We actually have an absentee process. So you actually have to fill out that application, send that in before you can get a ballot. So the process is important if you're going to be voting absentee. So we will get that corrected, I promise you. And you will have more application hopefully by tomorrow, and I will get an answer hopefully before the night ends. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have another question in the chat? Because I have one for both of you. Attorney Griggs, I can't read your question. Can we have that question back up again from Attorney Griggs? Okay. Can you pledge, if elected, to push President Biden to sign and execute an order to enforce the Voting Rights Act through his Justice Department, as the other sections are still good law? Thank you, President-elect Griggs, for that question. Let's start with, I think it's your turn, Representative Mcleod, to start with an answer to this question.
So there's not a question for me. That's an absolute yes, of course. There's no doubt about that. But, one of the reasons why I end up having threats to my life was because I completely do not want a statue of Clarence Thomas at the Capitol in Georgia. And I got calls from all over the United States with threats on my life. The reason why I object to that is because he was one of the ones that okayed the dismantling of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act for pre-clearance. Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act for pre-clearance. And again, this is a man who sits on the Supreme Court because of the privilege and the work that is done on his behalf. And he didn't see it necessary to fight to ensure that Section 4 was never struck down. And that is why we're in this mess right now in the state of Georgia, because it opened up the doors so that representatives on the Republican side could create legislation that basically was anti-voting, suppressive, and just anti-American, period. You cannot have a republic without representative democracy. You just can't. And so, yes, to your question, absolutely emphatic, yes, I will push on President Biden to do just that. He has the power of the executive branch. He has the power of executive orders. We need to get that done.
Thank you. Congresswoman Bourdeaux?
Sure. I am not sure that he needs to do an executive order to enforce the Voting Rights Act, because the sections still are good law. And that is why I sent a strongly worded letter to Merrick Garland to urge him to use that to the fullest extent possible, and to make sure that states like Georgia do not get out of line. And I think that is one of the reasons that they swiftly reversed the automatic voter registration, or I guess it's not exactly automatic voter registration, but it was when you go and change your driver's license, it was presumed that you wanted to vote and that you were therefore registered to vote. And then they changed their computer system to give you a yes or no check. And because of that, people got confused and were not registered to vote. This is a big problem, because I've talked to all sorts of people who have moved recently, or moved into Georgia, or young people getting a driver's license, and they all think they are registered. But because the secretary, it's actually the Department of Driver Services, which answers to Governor Kemp, made this change, the voter registration last year dropped by 40%. And because of that, myself, Nikema Williams, Sanford Bishop, we fired off a letter within, a couple hours of finding out about this to the Department of Justice, as well as to the state, to tell them to fix this ASAP, and they did.
Can I say something?
Just a moment, please.
Mhm.
Are you through, Congresswoman Bourdeaux? Okay, thank you. Is that a rebuttal?
No, I want to make a clarification. I don't think Representative Bourdeaux understand what Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act did.
Okay, so it does sound like a rebuttal, so we will give you
rebuttal.
1 minute
Okay.
for your time.
Yes. Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act was about pre-clearance, so that states like Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, those were the ones that were enslaved, were states that enslaved, basically could create new laws to basically stop someone from voting or make it harder. So when back in the 60s, when they were doing bubbles on a soap bar and how many jelly beans in a jar, that was the pre-clearance part. And what Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act did was say states like Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama, you can no longer do that without consulting the federal government. So the other parts of the Voting Rights Act are still in place, like Section 2. But we found it hard, even with the census this year, to even use Section 2 because it's so watered down. And when we're talking about Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, that's the part we're talking about, pre-clearance, which basically stops states like Georgia from implementing laws that would cause voter suppression. So it's not about just registering, it's about suppression.
No, it's not.
Okay,
No.
just a moment. Just a moment. Thank you for that rebuttal. Congresswoman Bourdeaux, we would love to give you your minute rebuttal also. We can't hear you. Congresswoman Bourdeaux, we cannot hear you. You're on mute.
Huh. You have to unmute me.
No, there you are.
Yeah, I think somebody had the controls and was muting me.
Okay. All right.
So I understand pre-clearance quite clearly, and I understand the challenges now that they commit the crime, right, and then we have to litigate around it, which often takes years to actually address the problem. By then, the vote has happened. The problems have occurred, and it's too late to change the results of an election, which is why pre-clearance is so important. It's so important to get that reinstated. That's why I am a original co-sponsor of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. That's why I, stood up in the Democratic caucus and was like, get moving on that. We need that pre-clearance back quite desperately. I was just giving you an example, though, of the work that I try to do because we don't have pre-clearance, because we are dependent on Section 2 and that sort of retroactive enforcement, the work that I do to try to continue to keep voting rights alive and keep those issues going here in Georgia to address some of those problems. And so that was what I was trying to convey with that one small example.
Okay, thank you. And we still have time for more questions. I want to make sure, David, it seems like we just morphed into the last segment with these questions. I want to make sure that if you had any questions, while you're thinking, I do have one that I want to put forward to these two candidates. And over 181 million in federal funds were given to Gwinnett County through the COVID Relief Acts. Many communities, again, African American and people of color, are still recovering as homelessness, joblessness, and people are still not able to afford to eat. This money was controlled by third-party non-government organizations set up in Gwinnett County who have no transparency or accountability to the taxpayers. Gwinnett NAACP is asking that these monies be audited so that we can see who received these dollars and how they were spent. We hit many brick walls when we're asking about dollars in Gwinnett. We need your assistance. And I will put this question directly to you. We're requesting an audit. Congresswoman Bourdeaux, can we get your take on how these monies need to be accounted for?
Sure. And, I am happy to look into it and to talk with folks at the county level about what's happened, and am happy to discuss, ways to make sure that we have oversight. This was very flexible funding that was given to the county commission. And so they made a number of decisions about how this funding would be allocated. To the extent that I've had more direct engagement with the funds, we've had some real successes. And so first of all, in terms of the audit, I'm happy to talk with you about that. And if you can send a letter to my official side, I'm on the campaign side right now, I'm happy to discuss sort of how that money was spent and sort of what your concerns are. In terms of the recovery funds, though, they have gone for a lot of very, very important purposes, many of them really to address deep-seated inequities. One of the real successes we've had working with Gwinnett County with Project Reset was in avoiding evictions. And we have worked with them to get that money out the door. Gwinnett County, actually, we worked to help them get another $25 million. And by using that funding effectively, Gwinnett is the top county in the country, well, actually the top 10 to be fair, in using those funds in order to avoid eviction. They have helped 17,000 individuals stay in their homes. And my office has literally picked people up who had their furniture on the street corner and helped them get back into their homes. And so that is one of the many partnerships and things we've been able to do by working with the county and using those American Rescue Plan funds to really serve this community in Gwinnett.
Thank you for that. Representative Mcleod, if you're elected or in your capacity as a state rep, the Gwinnett NAACP will be requesting an audit on these funds. Many people are still suffering in Gwinnett County from not getting equitable share of resources and monies. If you could respond to that, please.
Absolutely. During the pandemic, we had a lot of my businesses and the small businesses in our community struggled because of that, and there was funds there. And so one of the things I will say, because I'm a very root cause person, if we're going to be making legislation, especially with big dollar amount, there should be some guidelines as to how the funds should be managed and what kind of reporting there should be to the federal government. Remember, this is taxpayer dollars, and it's accountability to the taxpayer, because when we're elected, we work on behalf of the people that we serve, and their money is how we use it, and they should get that return on investment. And it should be available to everyone because it's their money, all of our monies. And so I'm very disappointed in the way some of the money's been handled in the county. And again, I support an audit, because if we did not put this in the legislation to make sure that we had some kind of accountability and reporting, shame on us for not doing that. That's one of the things that we're constantly hollering in the state legislation, is that, did you budget for this? The Republicans were passing bills in the state legislature, and there is no fiscal note. None. SB 202 passed without a fiscal note. So the money's, where the money's coming from, and who's accounting for it, and who's reporting it. So yes, I completely support an audit, and I will insist upon it. We have the same issues with the unemployment, because during the pandemic, we saw people just hurting because unemployment was giving money, and they weren't giving it to the people either. And I hope that the federal government has taken back their money. The federal government is taking back our money that they gave to the unemployment office that was not used.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, I have another question. needing resolve from our elected officials. The Gwinnett NAACP has been on the ground, and part of what we have been talking about is voting rights and combating voter suppression. Well, our own very Board of Registration and Elections has known that a new precinct needed to be built in the Grayson, Triple Mill, Loganville area because of the influx of new residents who have moved there. However, we as the Gwinnett NAACP has been asking for over a year for the building and finding this place. It has not been done. Tina Fleming, who is the county director over community affairs, who oversees the Board of Registration and Elections, decided that it was not necessary to have this new facility built. Rather, she would wait until the fall and then have that place by the fall, November general elections. Shame on Tina. We have requested a meeting with Zach Manifold, Tina, and representatives from the Board of Registration and Elections, and they have not responded to our requests. As elected officials, we would like to know how you could help us intervene on this matter, that voters will be inequitably removed from the ability to vote for judicial elections in this new district, and it was no concern. So how can we get help from our elected officials? Congresswoman Bourdeaux, if you would start, please.
Sure. So, I am happy to talk with you more about these kinds of issues. This is a, local issue that runs through our local Board of Elections, and they have been pretty beleaguered lately. They had to roll out entirely new voting machines in 2020, and then had to deal with COVID, then had to do the absentee ballots plus the new voting machines. Then as we get into 2021, the state passes SB 202, which has all sorts of other regulations and challenges. So I know that they are struggling. What I can do constructively, I am happy to call people and check into what's going on that front. But what I can do constructively from the federal level is provide resources to our boards of elections. And so one of the things I have been working on, I have led the effort in the House to get more money from the federal level to help our boards of elections function more effectively. And recently, I think it was last week, sent a letter requesting $5 billion to help boards of elections all across this country roll out effective technology and to help them have the resources to administer elections in a way that is both secure and gets us the results in a fair and timely way, and we make sure that there are not glitches and all of those other challenges. And that was a request from people like Kathy Woolard in the Forsyth Board of Elections, as well as from people in the Gwinnett County Board of Elections.
Thank you for that response. And just an FYI, I need my own rebuttal. The funds are not the issue in Gwinnett County on establishing voter precincts. That is not the issue. It just was not prioritized because of the biases and the community it affects. It affects, again, Black people and other marginalized people who are not a priority. It is not a money issue. So, and I thank you for that, Representative Mcleod.
Yes. So
excuse me, just before you speak, I want to make sure that Congresswoman Bourdeaux does not have a response back.
Oh, sure. I mean, I am happy to be helpful as you deal with this particular issue. Again, this is the Board of Elections, which is under the county, which is under the state. Right. And so I don't have a direct line to this particular problem other than just being somebody, an interested party in these kinds of issues. And I do care about that. And I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to vote. Absolutely.
Exactly. Because it's an election issue is why I was bringing it to your attention. Thank you.
Good to know.
Representative Mcleod, your input on this situation.
So again, I'm not disputing, I agree with you. We're not disputing that there's been some overwhelming external issues like the pandemic and other things. But this issue is not about that. And those of us that have been dealing with Tina Fleming, we know that she is not one that likes to, how should I say, open things up properly or to make things more accessible or equitable. She has never been that. Over the years we've encountered. I don't know why she's still there. I am always confused by that because she does not do her job properly. She's always at a reluctancy. And I think this is where I would ask of you, because I'm a person who's a root cause person, if you can send me an email, because again, everything must be done in writing. It must be documented, because we can't keep people accountable if we don't have documentation to prove that we actually asked. So if you can send me an email on that, I will forward it on to Zach and make sure. I also do have an answer for you all on the application. There should be some in tomorrow. And he was actually, Steve, they was very upset that the person at the desk wouldn't even get up and make a copy, because that's all they had to do was print one off of the board from the Secretary of State website, print it off and give it to that person and make some more copies. This is unacceptable, because this is a minor thing. And if you're at the front desk, this should be a part of what you do. But yes, absolutely. Tina Fleming is not the kind of person who's very proactive about this. And we've always had to push her to do the right thing.
Okay, thank you for that. It's your Gwinnett NAACP in the trenches, asking the questions that need to be asked. We are now winding down. David, you've been really quiet lately. Let's see if we can bring you to the forefront.
Okay, I did have one additional voting rights question if we have time.
Please, yes.
Okay. The language access provisions included in the Voting Rights Act are important for Latinx, Hispanic voters, and other marginalized communities who continue to be disenfranchised at the voting booth. What solutions can you offer to ensure that communities that meet the Section 203 threshold meet and or improve their compliance with language access requirements?
So right now, we do the ballots with the two languages, and I was there when Arvi Sato, I think it's Sato, he was the one that led the charge back in the day. I think it was 13, 14. He was the one that was leading the charge, and of course it's on the ballot. But I think we can do better in making sure that almost anything that's government run, and unfortunately we couldn't get the state of Georgia to do all documents that's government driven in bilingual. But I think that we can push Gwinnett County to do everything that they're doing bilingual. They've tried, I think they've got most of the stuff done. But again, that also requires that the Latinx and the Latin community also ensure that they have a good translator that's hired. That's very important to making sure that we have accurate language in the way things are said and people can understand it. I know that there was some issues in just hiring someone at the very beginning. I think they got someone good, but I think they need more than one person on staff, and that's something I think that we can advocate for to make sure that that is a built-in part of Gwinnett County. And I'm hoping that the entire state of Georgia find it to be a resource. And I think they're going to add 4 other languages. I think Cantonese, Mandarin, Korean, and I can't remember the other one, because we are this diverse mosaic, and everybody needs to be represented, and everybody needs to be able to understand the things that they are reading, and that they can give a good response to whatever they need to get done.
Thank you, Representative Mcleod. And I'll give that great shout out to Harvey Soto, a past warrior who lived at the Board of Registration and Elections meeting representing the Latinx community.
Yes, I have to remember.
Harvey Soto. And Congresswoman Bourdeaux, if you would please answer that question.
Sure. Yeah. So the thing that is problematic is that we had to litigate to get the ballots in English and in Spanish, which is absurd, right? The law is what the law is, and we shouldn't have to force the state to do those kinds of things. So, if there are other situations that Galeo comes across, other counties, I know there are other counties where the Hispanic community is rapidly reaching that threshold where the ballots by law have to be provided in multiple languages. Reach out to my office. I am happy to advocate to make sure that the state does that, and the Department of Justice is on top of that to get that done. Other than that, I think Gwinnett is working very hard to try to make sure that it provides resources in multiple different languages. We are a wonderful and very diverse community, and we want to make sure that nobody is disenfranchised, and language barriers can create those kinds of problems. I think I'll just leave it at that. I know we're getting late here, but I support those provisions and want to make sure that they are being properly enforced.
Thank you. Thank you for that. David, is that it, or are there any more questions from your perspective?
That's it from us. Thank you both.
Okay. Well, we really appreciate everybody being patient. We had a lot of questions that were asked. We're hoping that it covered a spectrum where people learned, and this was a positive experience. We would like to, at this time, close this down with your elevator speeches. Please tell us in 2 minutes why we, the people of Gwinnett County and in the Congressional 7th District, need to vote for you as candidates for this Congressional 7th District seat. Our incumbent, Congresswoman Carolyn Bourdeaux, please have this floor.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the Gwinnett NAACP and Galeo Impact Fund for hosting this forum. And thanks to everybody who tuned in and is still with us after these few hours. So as a Congresswoman from Georgia's 7th District, I show up, I listen, and I deliver. And I want to emphasize the show up part because Congresswoman Lucy McBath, who has decided to leave the 6th District and come over here and run against me, is not here and has not showed up in the way that I have over and over and over again for this district. I have done over 220 community events. I have done 17 town halls. I have done 2 jobs fairs. I am deeply involved and engaged in the diverse communities of this district. And I have delivered for this district. I helped pass the American Rescue Plan, which was made possible by my flipping this seat and being the only Democrat in the country to flip a Republican seat. And that helped give the Democrats a slim margin in the House and was instrumental in helping flip Georgia for the 2 Senate seats. So we delivered that, and that got shots in arms. That got the money to the local governments, to small businesses all around our community. That reduced health insurance costs. I have delivered the largest infrastructure investment in American history. I have delivered for our small business community, and because of a bill that I passed, 270,000 small businesses with a real focus on minority and women-owned businesses were able to access $5 billion worth of aid. I am leading the charge on Medicaid expansion with Senator Warnock, something very, very important, and something that passed the House as part of Buildback Better. I have also worked on a host of other more local issues, such as reducing evictions, delivering projects such as early childhood education to our schools. I've been endorsed by over 50 major community leaders, including Nicola Hendrickson, the county chair, and Ambassador Andrew Young, the noted civil rights leader. I show up, I care, I ask for your support in the primary on May 24th.
Thank you, Congresswoman Carolyn Bourdeaux. Representative Mcleod, may we have your elevator speech, 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you to the Gwinnett NAACP and Galeo for this opportunity to speak to the voters. I was elected in 2018 and re-elected in 2020 by a landslide. I am State Representative Donna Macleod. I was born in the island of Jamaica, the beautiful island of Jamaica, and grew up in Ontario, Canada. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm a chemical engineer, a small business owner, and now I am a candidate for the 7th Congressional District because I know the 7th and the 7th knows me. I've been living here for 22 years and I've been doing the work here. I don't have to list. I can show you what we've done because of this county. The way it looks now is because of the work that I've done in this county. I'm not asking anyone. I'm telling you, long before I ever was elected, I was in a lawsuit to make sure the Board of Commissioner and the Board of Education in Gwinnett County was diversified. In 2018, we elected the first time people of color on those boards. And that's because of the effort from me on lawsuits challenged in this county. So I don't have to brag about it. I'm telling you, it's a fact. I've registered over 30,000 people in this county. I've worked towards ensuring that we had extended early voting and Sunday souls to the polls along with President Poole. We 3 Black women made that happen in this county. And we're not bragging on that. We did it without any notice. We just did it because it was the right thing to do. None of my opponents in this race, none, not Lucy Mcleod or Congresswoman Bourdeaux, live in the 7th Congressional District. None of them. So they will not be able to vote for themselves. We can't afford people to do musical chairs with our representative democracy and our republic. You can't just, when the music stops, decide what seat you want to sit in and just run in there. And I understand that she might be the incumbent for the 7th as it was, but we've changed the lines and it's more conducive for somebody who looks like me to represent this area. The people in the most diverse district in the state of Georgia deserves representation and get a return on investment. I introduced legislation to ensure we have pre-K, to look at the funding formula for our school system.
Representative Macleod.
Please visit my website at donnamacleod.com, and I humbly ask you for your vote.
Thank you. Again, we'd like to thank all of our guests. Again, our Representative Donna Macleod, Congresswoman Carolyn Bourdeaux, and thank you to our other special guests, President-elect Gerald Griggs, who was able to sit with us through this program, myself and Galeo. Let me turn it over to David Garcia for his closing remarks, and we will quickly give you an adieu.
Thank you again, Congresswoman Bourdeaux and Representative Mcleod, for joining us. We thank you for your service, and we're happy that you joined us here tonight. Thank you.
Wonderful. And the Gwinnett NAACP, we recognize the beloved community. We strive. Please be safe. Wear your mask. And as always, we will close with a parting prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for what you have done. We thank you for grace and mercy that covers us going and coming. We just ask that this event was uplifting to your community, enlightening, educating, and informing your people. Lord, we just ask that we work with one accord, we bond and stand for human beings, projecting how you would have us to walk, talk, greet, and treat each other. We pray this prayer in the blessed name of my God, Jesus, and in your God, we lift up also. Amen, amen, and amen.
Amen.
We thank you for this evening. Have a great evening. Remember to vote. Early voting started today on May 2nd. The polls are open from 7 to 7. Visit mvp.sos.georgia.ga. That's mvp.sos. And I'm always putting that in the wrong order. visit our website, visit Galeo, and find out about the candidates. Please vote. Blessings.